Hi and welcome back to a new video. Today we're talking about setups because next month is my 10-year Twitch anniversary and my 9-year partner anniversary.
I spend my pocket money on V-Bucks and vapes.
I do want to take a moment to talk about all the things people usually recommend when it comes to streaming setups, what my streaming setup looks like, and kind of de-influence you a little bit on a lot of what you're seeing on a lot of the streamers and why I personally don't think some of these things are worth their money or where I think you should be spending that kind of money. A very quick story on the lack of uploads in the last couple of weeks. I was in the USA for the Race to World First, as some of you I'm sure know already, but I have a lot of stuff coming up, so I'm very excited for those videos and I hope you are as well. I personally think there are a lot of things you should be paying attention to when it comes to streaming and wanting to. The most important are having a decent sound, having a decent camera if you are opting to use one, and having a decent stream quality overall. That means decent internet and a decent PC to be able to deliver all of that. If you're just starting out, those should be the bare minimum points that you are covering. And you absolutely do not need to spend the types of thousands of dollars that I, for example, have spent on my setup over the years. My setup has cost me upwards of 6,000 euros, so let's go through the things that have added up to that price, and I'll explain what products I used before and where I think you should be spending big money and where I think you can spend less and get very, very similar results. Starting out with the basics, and by basics I do mean the basics, your desk, your chair, that kind of setup that you are running. Now, I have a standing desk, and that is very important to me personally because I need a big desk to sprawl out on, to do a lot of my work on, and I am spending upward of 12 hours each day on this desk. And so I wanted to be able to stand up and do something for my health. If you are planning to become a full-time streamer, then being able to invest into your health is like the thing I would say put money into. Everything else you can get from streaming later on, but your health, you cannot get that back, right? So if there's one thing I think you should invest in, then it is your health and your back, and a standing desk is very helpful in that regard. I personally enjoyed this a lot. You can get them for cheaper. Mine was 830 euro altogether. But if you want a smaller desk or if you want a DIY one, you can get far cheaper options, so do consider all of these alternatives. Next up, let's talk about my chair, because chairs I feel like people always have a lot of opinions on. There is a lot of consensus of if you don't have this and that brand chair, then you are breaking your back and it's very bad for your health and so on. I personally think as long as you are A, comfortable, and B, do not experience any pain, like it shouldn't force you in an unnatural position, then you are okay in my book. I've got a Maxnomic. I've been using these for nearly a decade now, and before that, believe it or not, I was using an IKEA armchair because to me that was the most comfortable on. I will say I have ADHD, I'm hyper flexible. I do sit in a lot of weird ways that might be uncomfortable for other people, but I need a chair to support that kind of posture. For example, right now, or basically every single time I record, I am sitting crisscross applesauce because that is how I like to sit comfortably, and that is what allows me to have a posture that is good for my personal body. You absolutely do not need Herman Miller in order to have a good chair. There is plenty of chairs out there that are very good, and you don't need to spend that insane amount of money on a chair. If you do have a Herman Miller and you love it, that's great. I love that for you. But I'm just saying, there are ranges of getting a good chair, and the most important thing is you're comfortable and you're not experiencing pain. And I kind of think it's weird how obsessive some people are when it comes to chairs and all of that thing. Next up, I obviously have a beast of a PC, as I'm sure all of you know, and I am planning on upgrading it even further. More on that in a future video. And if you want to stream, you should have a decent CPU, a decent GPU, and a decent RAM to sustain your games, as well as being able to process all of the inputs that you are needing to process in order to put a stream up into the interwebs. The one thing that bottlenecked my PC when I started streaming 10 years ago was actually my cooling. So I had a rather bad CPU cooler and I didn't have the best airflow for the case that I was using at the time. So that was what was basically chucking up my stream for a lot of my early streams. And one of my very first investments into my PC was actually getting a new CPU cooler and fixing that airflow. And so my CPU wasn't as overloaded, even though the PC back then wasn't that strong. But I do recommend looking into these tiny upgrades that you can do without spending too much money. Sometimes it is not your CPU, sometimes it is not your GPU, but rather the supporting structure. If you are investing into bigger upgrades though, make sure you are future-proofing a little bit and not buying a mainboard of 2 generations ago or something like that. So just putting that out there. Often you can get quite far with just upgrading the RAM or making sure your cooling, your airflow, your temperatures are in a good range for whatever you're doing. And then of course using the right settings, but that would go over the extent of what we want to do in this video. Now, let's talk about the important key factors as I see them, and that is lights, camera, and audio. You might be a little bit confused on why I'm putting lights in that category, because I feel like it gets forgotten by many people how important lights are and what they can do for your setup in terms of quality for pictures. Now, if you are somebody that is not using a camera or using a VTuber that doesn't use face tracking and so on, just skip ahead. You don't need to watch this part. If you are planning on using a camera for one thing or the other, make sure you know about your lighting situation. For my setup, I am using 3 points of light. I have one over there, I have one over there, and then I have one behind me to make sure I'm not blending in with the background. Let me show you what it looks when each of these lights is off, okay? Let's run a little bit of a test here. So this is my left light. As you can see, if I only use one light, I am starting to get rather harsh shadows in my face. And then if I'm not using any of the lights, my face suddenly is very dark. And now for my last trick, let me turn off my light that I have behind me because yeah, now everything is gone. And even if you have a really great camera, you will feel the quality deteriorate as soon as you are cutting a lot of the light sources. So I think there's a lot of nonsense when it comes to lights for streaming. And I also think there are some things that make a lot of sense. So consider your space, okay? Consider what you're working with, consider your camera. If you are using a webcam rather than a full-fledged camera, and we'll talk about cameras in a second, then definitely invest into lights. They're so light dependent and you can get a lot with just a very minimal setup. For a long time, I've been using ring lights. I see ring lights recommended by a lot of the people. I personally think if you have 2 tiny LED cubes, you are way better off than with a ring light. It's more dynamic, you can use it in different situations, and usually it gives you a better result as well. I personally have opted away from all of my fancy studio lights. I had a lot of lights over the years, and for the setup that you are seeing right now, I am using 2 Logitech Litra that cost like €45 each. There is even cheaper ones if you are not interested in a software integration, but make sure that you can change the light intensity, so dim it and go brighter, and make sure you can change the light color. So going from a very cool white to a warm white should be possible to make you look more human and less like an alien, because if I change these color values, let me tell you, it looks kinda insane. You do not need Elgato lights. Sorry, Elgato, you do not need fancy studio lights or €600 aperture domes. Yes, they will give you a little bit of a softer light, but that is such a minimal upgrade that most people won't notice in the first place. And if you're just starting out, or if you just want to stream for fun, or if you're just looking for a solid upgrade, look into 2 LED points first before you are investing into something big as a studio light with a dome on top of it. I feel like audio is kind of a mystery to everybody that works with cameras and video technique. There's a lot of options, they're vast and plenty, and I personally started out using a singing USB microphone because that is what we had at home. I was using a T-Bone SC450, and I feel like barely anybody uses these because everybody's always like, oh, I need something for podcasting, I need something for streaming, I need something for gaming or whatever, even though those microphones can give you really good results when it comes to the sound quality. So don't neglect the singing part of microphones, there's a lot of good stuff there. If you are in a pinch and you don't want to spend money for an extra microphone like I have, for example, and you just want to use a headset microphone, I am hereby begging you to not opt for a wireless headset. The quality on wireless headset microphones generally is not very good, and you will get far better results if you are using a cable one. If that is the only investment you can make, then look at that. I personally wouldn't want to be tied to my desk ever again, if you know what I mean. So I am using a standalone microphone, but even there you can go from 50 bucks all the way up to the thousands. So make sure you are aware of what your options are. A lot of the streamers I'm sure you're aware of are using Shure SM7B, and that is a great microphone. In my opinion, it's specifically great for when you have a deeper voice, so most of the male streamers really profit off of that. I am, however, seeing a lot of female streamers also using that one, and I feel like there are better microphones out there for that kind of voice color or voice tone. So I personally have compared a lot of microphones, and I found somebody that had a similar voice tone to me and did a lot of reviews on microphones, so I was kind of lucky in that regard, and I opted for the Shure SM27LC, which is what you're seeing right here. And then I have it on a little microphone arm so I can put it out of the way when I'm not streaming, because it is a little bit in my way, but for streaming that's just where it needs to be. It needs to be close to your face. If you are opting to buy a $600 microphone, you're putting it up there half a meter away from your face, then you might as well just use a headset mic because it will sound bad. In order to make a microphone work that is not a USB microphone, you do need a mixer in between your microphone and your PC in order to process the signal that's coming in. Those cost a lot of extra money, and if you are not familiar with what these buttons do and how to set up your sound in a way that sounds good, then you should not be getting these. The upgrade is so minimal, and you absolutely do not need a DBX, a Scarlett, or whatever mixer is out there in order to have a good sounding voice. You can just go for a USB mic and then use some software mixer that is on your PC already. I promise you, if you look into that, you will get nearly exactly the same results, and it will be far, far cheaper. Lastly, let's talk about cameras. And mine actually died on me today, so I am in a splendid mood to talk about cameras. When I started out, everybody was using the Logitech C920, and honestly, for the time being, that was a good webcam. Nowadays, webcams deliver much, much better quality imaging, and I feel like you can get away with doing just chatting or full screen camera streams with just a webcam. Now, I might sound crazy, but I think it can work as long as you have a good lighting setup. So if you are really in a pinch and you don't want to spend a lot of money, look towards the webcams, look towards the Brio MX. I think there's a Razer one that's like a pro streamer camera or something that's pretty good. Just make sure you have enough light sources to allow that webcam to work as well as it can, and you will be fine. Especially if you're only using the camera in like a small corner of the stream, you do not need a a big ass camera. If you are planning on filming more than just that, you may want to think about investing into a big camera. And once again, we are in a field of ranges. A lot of the higher end streamers are using the Sony Alpha 7 III. So that is a very, very expensive camera. It's a very big camera. It's a full sensor camera. I don't think you need that. I personally am not using it for nothing that I do. I'm still using a Sony Alpha 6000, and my second camera that I got is the one that is now broken, so great advertisement, but it is the Sony ZV-E10. Now, there is something to be said about using something like an Alpha 6000 because you will need a camera link or a capture card that you can deploy onto your main board in order to get a good image quality with something like the Sony Alpha that I'm using right now. If you're using something like the Sony ZV-10, then you can just plug it in through USB-C and it enables USB streaming and it's plug and play and it's rather cheap in that regard because a good capture card will also set you back plenty. If you're planning on streaming from a console as well or from different devices, then investing in a capture card might make sense either way, and you can also go for an option like the Sony Alpha 6000. I will say, and heed like a word of caution, it really depends on what kind of lens you're using on how your camera quality is going to look. Consider how deep is the space that you can use. I personally can touch the wall that's behind me. That means there's not a whole lot of space here in order to give my camera image a lot of depth. In order to help with that, I got a camera lens that works for that kind of depth that I am working with. If you have a big room in the back and you want that nice blur, you need a different lens than if you are sitting right in front of the wall like I am. So do consider that, do a little bit of homework there, but you do not need a big $2,000 camera, and you might not even need a full camera to begin with. You might be perfectly fine with one of the 4K webcams that are now on the market, so long as you are supporting it with sufficient lighting sources. I hope this video was a little bit helpful. I'm seeing a lot of kind of influencing of you need this and you need that out there. So I just wanted to share some of my opinions and where I think you should be spending money, where you shouldn't be spending money. Let me know down below if this was helpful to you. And I'm very curious to read on how you guys are feeling about this whole topic. I'm gonna be seeing you in the next video because I am off tonight to actually drive to my grandma and build something. So that is gonna be a fun video coming up. And then of course we have some stuff to do with my PC in the next video. So if that sounds interesting to you, consider leaving a subscribe and consider leaving a like as well if you like that video. And I hope I see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.